Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Russia is having major issues with its allies. It is very important in a war to be strong, especially in attrition warfare. It is important to be strong for a long time. But it's important to be strong not only on the resource front, as Russia is, because of their stockpiles and because of the super profits that they accumulated over the years, but it is also important to be strong politically. And for a very long time, it was Ukraine that found itself on a receiving end of this strong, weak balance point, where Ukraine was perceived as a ultimately weaker party that has, using the language of the US president, no cards on its hands. However, the situation changed very thoroughly in 2025, where Russia finally started running out of their stockpiles of weapons. They started running low with their economic performance, and more importantly, their gains on the battlefield were completely inadequate. And now Russia is not perceived already as strong anymore. And more importantly, the tendency is very clear for pretty much anyone. That downward trend is undeniable for Russia. So let's talk about today's daily news and we'll see what else is there for Russia. At the end of 15th century, Gian Giacomo Trivulzio has famously advised Louis XII of France that to carry out war, three things are necessary: money, money, and yet more money. And nowadays, nothing has really changed. This is still the equation for war. So it is absolutely crucial to see how Russia is doing on the money front. And for a very long time, it was the sales of oils that was guaranteeing Russia stay in the war game, as they are the aggressor party here. But now, with a lot of the sanctions put on the Russian shadow fleets that are already cutting down on a lot of Russian transport overseas, Ukraine striking refineries, which we're going to remark on later in this video, and also United States now putting additional pressure as a third-party sanctions, essentially isolating Russian oil producers, we now see that even countries that were helping Russia circumnavigate their sanctions are now stating no. We hear the news that Turkey is cutting their Russian oil imports amid the sanctions. More than that, there is also sharp decline in exports of oil to India, one of the critical markets for Russia, as they are the main purchaser of Russian crude oil. And also China. They are shunning some of the Russian oil after the US sanctions. Very often we discussed what is the pathway to victory. Is there even a pathway to victory? Yes, there is. And it has always been there. It's just we have never really approached it. But with now Turkey, China, and India actually putting some kind of a pressure on Russia. Now, I don't trust any of these countries. I don't trust for one bit that they will not start looking for a way to circumnavigate these sanctions and get around them. But the already done parts are putting very strong signal to Russia. This is the way how this war ends, because of the truth that we just discussed. This is the pathway to victory that will lead to finally ending the Russian brutal war on Ukraine. So if anything, then when you look at these sanctions and you look at these countries giving first steps, stating no to Russia, even I agree, like again, don't trust a single word. But we are getting there. The main and important part is that we are finally getting there. This is the signal that we all have been waiting for Europeans and Western powers to finally start putting the boot on the Russian neck. But more than that, there are certain allies that Russia has really enjoyed in Europe because of their influence. And with the drying up coffers of cash, Russia is now also seeing some of these allies finally smelling that the money might be running dry quite soon, so it's potentially time to switch ships. Serbia had a very interesting relationships. We already knew that under the table, Serbia was one of the countries that was participating in the Czech Weapons Initiative program. Czech Weapons Initiative is the program under which European countries are purchasing weapons across the world from third countries that want to stay anonymous. So, for example, even if politically they would like to see them align themselves with Moscow, they could still make some bang for buck in selling weapons to Ukraine. Usually it would mean also relatively low amounts, though not always. We know some countries that did provide significant amounts to Ukraine. But now we see that even the so-called big friend of Putin, Vucic, the proxy of Russia that was described for a long time ago, he understands where exactly the wind is blowing. And instead of going through these underhanded check initiatives that does imply that there is an additional costs and that implies that it cannot go all officially and it doesn't really contribute political points, it's just the economic ones, suddenly he realized that it's more profitable to start working with Europeans right now to be integrated in the revitalized European weapons initiatives, as money being spent in these programs in Europe is becoming quite obscene. And obviously, he's like, I want some of that. But that comes with the pain of declaring publicly that he will break with Russia, at least on certain level. The Ukrainian intelligence has released more information about the operation they've conducted in Pokrovsk with the helicopter, the one that Russians tried to pretend was a complete failure by showing a completely blurred video that you cannot geolocate or do anything. Well, now it turns out with additional footage and additional video, it was a more complex operation. And it was done specifically on what was I mentioning in my video on the front lines yesterday, is they're trying to undercut some of the Russian positions, deblocate some of the Ukrainian troops, and make a corridor for logistics just a bit wider until some of other actions are being done by Ukrainian forces, which is exactly what I was expecting. This is the type of operations that usually the intelligence services are conducting, so it was most definitely not a failure as Russia would try to portray them. President Zelensky stating that Flamingo missiles are very active and already there have been 9 operations in total where they have been used. So whoever was wondering whether or not these Flamingo missiles are being used, yes, they are being used. And we see this also in results on the ground. A bit of a misshot on my end. There were images that came out from, as was stated initially, from Moscow of Ukrainian strikes causing a blackout. Unfortunately, as we turned out, this was not in Moscow. This was near the Moscow, in a Moscow general, like region area. So not Moscow yet. But my hopes are still that at some point we will see Ukrainian strikes also reach the Moscow itself, and we will see Moscow inhabitants finally feeling some of this war coming back to haunt them. But blackouts was the name of the game for the last week. Blackouts were a response that Ukraine has promised to Russia if Russia will continue striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And this was been the clear pattern. After Russia conducts their time and again massive strikes against Ukraine, targeting energy infrastructure, gas infrastructure, Ukraine responds by striking their refineries and also now some of the energy infrastructure. Now, it's important to note that a lot of this energy infrastructure is not just purely civilian. So while it is being reported that energy is being lost for some of these facilities and civilians, it is also worth noting that in majority of the cases when there is a blackout, whenever there was certain digging in from the journalist side that I've read, it turns out that there is some kind of a bigger facility right there nearby that station that is actually feeding off of that power plant. So no, it's not always just for the sake of Russian or terror war. Ukraine is actually choosing their targets first and foremost on the military usefulness. In this case, in the Volgograd region, a fire broke out at Frolovskaya electrical substation. Governor Andrei Bocharov confirmed that debris from a downed UAV caused the blaze. It's always the downed UAV debris. Like if you follow the Russian news, you know that it's 100% interception. It's never drones striking anything. It's always the debris. In the Kursk region, more than 16,000 consumers in Rilsky Glushkov and Korinovsky districts were cut off from power after a local governor stated that there is an enemy strike on a substation as well. Ukraine destroys 3 lines of Russia's strategic ring pipeline in Moscow region overnight. So besides a blackout in the region, Ukrainian military intelligence carried out a precision strike overnight that destroyed 3 lines of Russia's critical ring oil product pipeline in the Moscow region, delivering a significant blow to the Russian military and its economy. The 400-kilometer ring pipeline connected refineries in Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Moscow, capable of transporting up to 3 million tons of aviation fuel, 2.8 million tons of diesel, and 1.6 million tons of gasoline each year. In Kstovo, Russia, 2 oil facilities were struck. A fire has broken out in an industrial zone in the town of Kstovo in Russian Nizhny Novgorod Oblast following a nighttime drone attacks. The fire started in the southeastern part of the industrial zone where there are 2 oil facilities, Sibur Kstovo and Lukoil Nizhnigorod Nefteorg Synthos. Those both are located quite close by to each other. In the Krasnodar region's Tuapse, Ukrainian drones struck an oil terminal and an oil tanker. 5 drones strikes were recorded according to the SBU. Following the strikes, a tanker caught fire. At least 4 piers used for loading and unloading tankers were rendered inoperable. Additionally, port buildings sustained damage. There are also unconfirmed messages that some of the other tankers might also have sustained damage, of up to 4 of them. I don't think a week goes by for Saratov oil refinery to be struck, but it's a large oil refinery. And during the night of November 2nd, the strike drones hit the Saratov oil refinery, one of the largest still operating in Russia. With regards to energy infrastructure, it stated 15 strikes in 50 days. Russia's power system lost up to 4% of its generation. Between mid-October and November 1st, Ukraine carried out at least 15 strikes on Russian energy facilities. The main targets were high-voltage substation and thermal power plants. According to the drone bomber OSINT resource, 1.2 to 2 gigawatts of generating capacity were disabled or damaged, which is about 3 to 4% of the total electricity production of Russia. So pro tip for the Russian fascists: if President Zelensky tells you that don't fire at our civilian infrastructure, we're gonna mess up your energy production output, listen to what he says. And most hilarious is this: Western oil companies see profit boost from Russian strikes and sanctions. So because of the strikes that Ukraine is conducting on the facilities in Russia, and additional there's sanctions that are being put on Russia, profits from refining at ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and Total Energies jumped 61% in third quarter compared with the previous quarter, boosting overall profits by 20%. And if you want to do a check mark on where we are right now, here is the bingo card for the refineries in Russia. We see that some refineries still haven't been struck, where the other refineries have been struck quite intensely. We don't know the specific logic behind why there are certain relatively big ones that still haven't been struck, but we definitely see that at least top 5 is a frequent guest on this strike list. And my hopes are that we're going to see even more of this. I mean, those are not hopes. President Zelensky clearly stated that this is a promise. And to help in strikes against the aggressor states, allies are crucial, and they are also delivering. United Kingdom sends more Storm Shadow cruise missiles to Ukraine. These missiles are quite capable. Government has recently provided Ukraine with additional Storm Shadow missiles. The exact number of missiles remained undisclosed, and delivery was not publicly announced. Storm Shadow are a British-made air-launched cruise missiles with a range of over 250 kilometers. They have shown themselves to be very, very capable in Ukraine, and they have delivered really good results. The supplies have been running somewhat low. That's why Ukraine mostly relied off its own produce. However, having more is better than having less. More than that, United Kingdom has also committed all of their AS-90 howitzers to Ukraine. UK Ministry of Defense has officially confirmed the transfer of all 99 AS-90 self-propelled howitzers that remained in service to Ukraine. There were additionally 37 howitzers that were expected to be scrapped, but it is expected that they were transferred to Ukraine anyway, partially for components, partially maybe restored to more operational state, depending on the needs of Ukrainians. Again, I'm happy to see that now we are disclosing less information on deliveries than more. Canada is providing Ukraine with 44 million help to restore energy infrastructure. Very critical help coming in the winter, as Russia is targeting Ukrainian infrastructure daily. So thank you so much to people and the government of Canada. Ukraine is aiming to open the defense production offices, and the first two are appearing this year in Copenhagen and Berlin. I will be going to one of these offices at some point, and we'll be having conversations, and we'll see what they will say for an interview and what we can disclose. I'm hoping we can use some of that material so I can help promote Ukraine. Overall, Ukraine has done a lot of really good work in 2025, moving away from just getting more help overall to now getting more of a contract agreement where there is something that is produced or being purchased by the countries. Ukraine signs over 20 contracts with partners countries to supply weapons to Ukrainian forces. It's part of the either Danish model, where the Western companies are purchasing weapons produced in Ukraine, or the Pearl initiative, in which countries are purchasing weapons produced in United States to be delivered to Ukraine. And now we see Serbia kind of looked at it, and they also decided to jump in. Right now, the estimated number is 1.4 billion as part of the Danish model and 2.8 billion as part of the Pearl initiative. So totaling just over 4.2 billion to date. My hopes are that we'll see these initiatives grow and increase in sizes. Then I want to tell you about this new tactic. In this article specifically, it refers to the Russian tactic, but I also for a fact know that Ukrainians are using this as well. It is a combination tactic by using two drones, the FPV drone, in addition to this so-called lightning drone. This lightning drone is basically a drone that is made of some pieces of plastic, couple of plastic pipes, and some duct tape. It's literally costs nothing. But this drone can fly pretty far, and you can just launch it and it will just go and fly certain direction. And it can carry the FPV drone on top of it that is then launched when it's closer to the target. And then they use the local 4G network to connect to the internet. So basically, they're trying to get through the electronic warfare systems and then launch FPV drones when there is an area by using the local internet connection that is not going to be jammed, because people will not see these drones. This tactic is going to be appearing, so don't be surprised if you will see footage from FPV drones coming tens of kilometers away from the front line, from either Russian or Ukrainian side. Now we know how they get there. Something I hoped I would never have to cover again, unfortunately happened again. And in my video for the problems of Ukrainian military, as the problem number one, I stated that it is morons in command positions. And here we have exactly the situation for morons playing out. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, commanders of units and pilots of drones have been assembled together for the awards ceremony. And it was a public awards ceremony with both civilians and military present in an open area, and the ballistic missile just arrived, killing both military and civilians in the area. Finally, to finish on a positive note, I think we have a new record. I think this one takes the cake so far. This, I don't even know how to call this coupe tank, hairy coupe tank. So this is the current modern Russian armor design on the tanks. I believe it is okay, no, I don't know tanks that well to say which tank it is beyond that, but it's a tank that Russia is using in their assaults. It has this big wig out of metal wires, and yeah, that's the current best armor design that Russia has in stock and that they're sending on the front lines. Hit the subscribe button if the tank made you smile and you want more people to see this video. I love you. Slava Ukraini. Trust in Ukraine. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. And I will see you next time.
I see you